What were the biggest stories of 2025? Hello and welcome to The Week in Restaurants, a look at the most important stories of the week in the restaurant industry. I'm Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and I am here with RB Executive Editor Lisa Jennings. This week, we take a look back at the biggest stories of the year in the restaurant industry, or at least the biggest stories that we saw. Later on in Tech Check, Senior Technology Editor Joe Guszkowski gives us a lesson in loyalty programs. But first, Lisa Jennings, what do you think was the biggest story of the year from your perspective?
Well, I would say two. I mean, the biggest story of the year, really undeniably, I think, for the restaurant industry has been the crackdown on immigration, the deportation effort by the Trump administration, which has been rippling through the industry all year in various cities. You know, there's been, the focus has kind of moved, or the spotlight has kind of moved, throughout the year. It's still going on. And it's something that I think that, probably we haven't talked about enough. It's a difficult subject to talk about with people in the industry because they're afraid to speak out about it. But, we have heard and seen quite a lot of, everything from small regional chains literally just shutting down because so many workers have been lost to this, to this movement or this effort. I think we will see bankruptcies. I think we'll see, I think we'll see this kind of ripple through the industry even more next year. But, it's something that the Independent Restaurant Coalition estimates has impacted, the food and beverage costs more than 14% just because of the way it impacts everything from the farm worker in the field to, the chefs in the kitchen. And it's just something that has been, it's been just a real drain and difficult issue, in particular for independent restaurants, smaller businesses that are struggling to kind of figure out how to deal with it. People are afraid to come to work, and fear was the whole point. The whole point of it seems, is to instill enough fear to encourage people to self-deport. And, what we don't have are really the full numbers of the kind of impact. We know, in the first 9 months of the year, there was an estimate of about 350,000 people lost, which is, across all industries. But because we know there are so many immigrant workers in the restaurant industry, I think the restaurant industry arguably was probably impacted more than any other. So to me, this has been absolutely the biggest story of the year. And I think it's going to sadly continue to be a story next year.
Yeah. I will say about immigration, and immigration is a topic that we are going to continue to cover into next year, 26. But it is, to me, both a top and a bottom line problem. So, I mean, we've seen chains like Jack in the Box in particular, but also, companies like El Pollo Loco and Wingstop and other concepts that have mentioned the impact of weakness among, Hispanic communities on their sales. We have seen data that has indicated that sales in markets heavy with people born outside the U.S., particularly in Mexico and Latin America, have been weaker over the past few months, actually over the past year. And quietly a real reason why a number of limited service chains in particular, but other chains too, have lost customers. And the fact of the matter is when there is this public a crackdown on immigration, it's going to affect a certain population. The bigger concern I have, and you've mentioned it, is the impact on labor. 1 out of every 5 restaurant employees were born outside the U.S. It's actually remarkably high. The restaurant industry has an insatiable need for employees and for a constant source of labor. And if we are limiting the number of people, because the U.S. does not produce enough of its own human beings. We don't have enough children. It's a really, really common issue throughout Western economies. It's a big problem in Asia. It's a problem in Europe and elsewhere, that once an economy reaches a certain state, people stop having children as much as they used to. And And that's a problem in the U.S. We don't produce enough of our own children, but immigration was always a competitive advantage for the U.S. and keeps the economy growing. There is a good chance that this year, that when we get the population estimates for 2025, that the U.S. population will have dropped. And so you are talking about fewer people. Fewer people means less meal occasions, and it means fewer potential workers, period. So it's a significant issue. And like, I'll also go back, and we just got through. In fact, we're still dealing with the ripple effects in the restaurant industry of generationally high inflation that was brought about by a labor shortage. We had a shortage of labor. That shortage of labor affected restaurants. That shortage of labor affected meatpacking companies. That shortage of labor affected farmers and agricultural companies that relied on them to help pick fruits and vegetables. So you also have supply chain costs as well. That everything, all these labor shortages in different industries hit restaurants really hard. Also hit grocery stores really hard, but it hit restaurants really hard. And restaurants had a double whammy of higher food costs, higher labor costs. They raised menu prices. And the result of this is we're now, I believe, on our third year of lower traffic. The average restaurant gets fewer customers than it did. And a lot of that is because of inflation, because of the way consumers view menu prices, because operators had no choice but to raise prices. I mean, you can only get so much efficiency out of the restaurant industry. AI is not helping. Robots are not helping. They need people. We need people to eat meals. We need people to cook meals. And if you're going to reduce the number of people in the United States, it is going to have an impact on the restaurant industry, period. So very significant issue.
Yes, indeed. What do you think is the biggest?
Oh, yeah. Well, I happen to think that the value wars this year were the biggest story. I mean, I honestly, I couldn't get out of bed without thinking about it, which is a little disturbing, frankly, because I really should think about something else. But it affected more sectors of the restaurant industry, I think, than it's ever affected before. The sector that I primarily cover, which is fast food, has been embroiled in a price war now, dating back more than a year, well over a year, actually almost a year and a half now. It's had minimal impact on traffic. 30%, by the way, 30% of customers are buying on a deal of some kind. Let's just take a look at McDonald's for instance. McDonald's kicked off a $5 meal deal in 24, effectively igniting the value wars that we see in the fast food space right now. And value, again, is all over the place. They kicked off that $5 meal deal. In January, they added another national price point, and they created sort of this McValue menu that sort of brought together all of their digital offers, their national and their local offers. They called it the McValue menu, started promoting it, and then they intensified everything over the summer by lowering prices on combo meals, extra value meals. And the jury, by the way, is still very much out as to whether these extra value meals are going to work. Now McDonald's has taken a step of writing into its value standards, or into its global franchising standards, not value standards. They're adding a value component to that, which, by the way, is a sticky wicket. As sticky a wicket as I've seen McDonald's do in a long career of watching them dive into sticky wickets, because that really gets into the pricing power of franchisees. And now McDonald's will push back on me hard on that one, but it's still getting into it. It is getting awful close to McDonald's telling franchisees how to price.
Right.
They're not going all the way there. I will say it. They're not telling them how to price, but it is inching closer. So it is that was a big deal in the McDonald's franchise system. It was a big deal, a far bigger deal than I think people really appreciate. So you got all of this, and then you've got all of these other chains that are doing value. We've got fast casual chains. I was walking out of a Five Guys in Washington, D.C. The Five Guys had a meal deal that they were advertising. And then the next door, there was an And Pizza that had its own value offer. So we see this all over the place. It's not entirely evident that it's working. All it's doing is it's probably protecting a certain amount of traffic. And it's a tough situation. I think that the industry finds itself in at the end of 25 because you do have some marketing promotions that'll work marvelously. The Grinch meal that just concluded, this Burger King SpongeBob meal menu did marvelously. We've seen over and over again marketing promotions get customers in the door. Value hasn't, at the very least, companies are holding serve on value. Unless you're a casual dining chain, then consumers view you as a different type of value. So you got chains like Chili's doing amazingly well, in part because of the value offer that they've had on their menu now for several years. But right now, the fast food sector has had a really, really hard time getting customers on a consistent basis.
Well, and it's, as you mentioned, drifted into fast casual, which used to be, that was the sector where they didn't really have to play that game. It was really about something more. They were doing promotions, they were promoting things, but not necessarily with discounts. But this is the problem with value wars, isn't it? It's when everybody starts jumping into, to offer something that is a cheaper offering, less expensive, I mean. Then everybody else has to kind of follow suit. And the fast casual, because the economy has hit the higher income, the younger consumer that was the fast casual, consumer, now they are having to play this game too. And it's been a real problem for brands like Sweetgreen, for example, which is, a brand that has always positioned itself as offering something better, higher quality ingredients, better for you positioning, and it's food prepared in house, all of these things that people go for when they're looking for something a little bit more than what is, typically offered in quick service. But you got to pay more for it. But now we're getting into the problem where bowls, they have this perception of being a $20 bowl. We've talked about this over and over again, but people just feel like that's too expensive now. And so we're seeing, they're doing an LTO that's a $10 bowl, which is a real value offering for Sweetgreen. And we'll see whether or not that pays off. Chipotle, they're all starting to talk more about protein to try to reach a targeted audience. We're all seeing them lean more heavily on their loyalty programs, which has become that's the way, a lot of value is portrayed by some of these chains, so they can at least limit it to the audience of their, of their membership. So, I mean, they got to play the game too now. And it is going to be a problem for profitability. It's in fast casual, there's, at least for the main ones, these are not franchise brands, Chipotle, Sweetgreen, and Cava. But, that's where it is going to show up in earnings. And we're going to start seeing, if you have to buy sales with discounts, there is always going to be a toll for that. So It's going to be interesting to see the kind of innovation that's going to come out of all of this. I mean, like things, the Grinch meal, you got socks, there were things that you get for that. It's I don't know. I think we're going to start to see the way these things are marketed really shift, and hopefully more creativity. But like you said, it's temporary. It buys sales for a little while, but it doesn't necessarily solve the overall traffic problems that they're facing.
Yeah. I want to, before we get to the next topic, I want to add one more point, because you mentioned buying sales and the risk of some of these discounts. If you go back to the $5 footlong, as an example, arguably one of the 5, maybe 3 most successful marketing campaigns in restaurant industry history. Too successful, actually. It was so successful that the company just relied on it, and at some point that $5 price point just became too much. And to this day, they haven't run it since 2012. And by the way, you can take a look at Subway's average unit volumes before and after 2012. There is a very direct correlation between Subway having the $5 footlong. They also expanded too rapidly and should have slowed down much earlier. But there is a very strong correlation between Subway's going off of the $5 footlong and declining average unit volumes. But they just didn't have a choice because franchisees couldn't make a profit. And you're going to see now, of course, they started closing stores anyway. But you can rely on these things way too long. And so my 10 perspective tends to be, if you're going to run a price point, it should be temporary, or it should be something that you can live for a long time with. And sort of like what Domino's has done with its value offers that it has, which I think now are priced at $6.99, used to be $5.99. And you keep them on, and then you just study it, and then once it gets too much, you increase the price. You have to do something like that, because if you run it too long, it can create enormous headaches for a brand. Right now, again, we're a year and a half into this price war. I mean, we could start getting into that before long. But now that said, I mean, you mentioned fast casual, and man, I got to say that one of the biggest surprises to me from the year is just how relatively widespread challenges in that sector was. You mentioned Sweetgreen; they've had issues.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. And I actually was reading some analyst reports this morning that were arguing that next year they're kind of thinking that things will improve for Cava and Chipotle. They're thinking that, things might start looking up next year, if certain things in the economy start looking a little bit more promising. But they don't usually include Sweetgreen in that. All three of these chains have really suffered this year. There's been this whole thing about slop bowls. And I get it. It was a cute headline that somebody came up with. It was something that was, there's a lot of slop in our world this year on AI nonsense and all of that. And so I understand why it's a word of the year. I get that. But I think it's really unfairly applied to these three chains, which are really not, yes, it's a bowl and stuff's all in there and gets mixed up. That's what consumers want. Bowls are growing. We're seeing more bowls. That's what people want to eat. The problem with these three and the sales decline has more to do with the macroeconomy, with the consumer that they appeal to struggling to pay for dining out. And so they're pulling back because these bowls tend to be a little bit more expensive. But it's not slop. It's actually a really good quality food that I think people do want. And there's been this whole thread on LinkedIn. Rick Van Zura, who was one of the old guard from Panera and was the CEO of Wahlburgers and various other things. He's now at Thrive Advisors. I think he's a consultant. Started this, basically a defense, of these chains against the slop bowl. And people are commenting like crazy about this. They have a lot of thoughts on it. But yeah, it's not fair to call it slop. It really isn't. I object as well as a fan of all three brands, but I'm afraid it has become a thing. People are talking about it that way. I just heard something on NPR the other night. There's a whole report on slop bowls, which is just, it's something that these chains are going to have to somehow address in marketing, or I don't know. I think they need to respond to it in some way and they are trying to sort of make the point that their ingredients are better, their suppliers are better. This is, antibiotic-free chicken and lots of vegetables. The macros, if that's what people are concerned about, they're all focusing on protein because they think that will get that audience. So hopefully the slop bowl thing will go away in 2026. We'll see about that. But meanwhile, they still have to address the challenges in fast casual that they have and to try to turn around sales. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what they do. Do you think it's going to... What do they need to do, Jonathan, in your mind?
Well, first off, on the slop bowl, people in New York need to shut the hell up. That's what it is. I love New York. I know a lot of people, but some of them are in such a damn bubble. It's not even funny. And, it is just so ridiculously elitist to use the term slop bowl and then just to trash it. And now everybody's using it and talking about it. And you're really hurting restaurant companies. You're potentially killing jobs, because if you look at some of these chains, and again, I don't think that's what's going on here, by the way. But like, let's just theorize that what's going on is now this broad rejection of slop of fast casual bowl concepts, and da 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 da. You're causing people jobs. You're causing real problems. And in reality, the reason why these bowls are popular is because guess what? People order them.
They taste good.
Chipotle did not start as a bowl concept. Chipotle started as a burrito concept. They serve big burritos. And the bowl was an afterthought. And consumers got the bowl because they could get a burrito in a much healthier format. And so you are sitting there trashing these bowls. And I don't mean to go on this rant. You're trashing these bowls that consumers ordered because they liked it and they wanted to eat healthier, when their other choice was to eat less healthy. And you're criticizing that? Screw you people. And I mean it. And I'm keeping it clean because normally I don't keep my language very clean except on public podcasts. In any event,
this is true.
This is very true. In any event, what else is? Oh, the reason why. Now, I think I think it tends to with the fast casual sector. I think it's economic. I think Chipotle has some specific issues over portion sizes and other issues, and I think that consumers, Sweetgreen definitely has a pricing issue, and Kava. Like, look, Kava is just tough comparisons. I mean, come on, man. I mean, they were doing like 40% plus 2-year comps in 24. You're expecting that, and they comp positive. They still comp positive. So whatever. So it's more a price value issue and things of that nature. I mean, Shake Shack has done enormously well.
I was just going to say, yeah.
They've done enormously well. So whatever. I think now will this year, 2026 be better? I am skeptical. And I will simply say the only reason why I'm skeptical. Now, if everything is equal and everything just sort of chugs along in this sort of like weird economy we're in, and it's the same weird economy that we're in next year, then, that you could see some recovery because of easy comparisons and things like that, marketing promotions and whatnot. Maybe more companies will just start selling cups of meat like Chipotle is doing now.
Right. A cup of chicken.
Calling it a protein cup, and it's just basically meat in a cup. God, that's the funniest product of 25, by the way. Congratulations, Chipotle. You've got this funniest product of 25. I think that's hilarious. But anyway, I tend to believe that we're in an AI bubble, and that once that bubble pops, and I think, my 2-bit stock watcher brain will predict that is more likely to pop at some point in the first half of 26. And then that all bets are off at that particular point, because once the stock market really gets hit hard like that, higher end consumers that have been holding up the economy and spending, that will dramatically slow down. And by the way, we still have concerns with the lower end consumer and things of that nature, and challenging. And then we got immigration limiting the population growth, my perspective is that it's probably, to me, pretty likely that we're going to have a tougher, in many respects, a tougher economy in 26 compared to 25. At the very least, it's still going to be choppy.
Yeah.
And that's roughly it. I had one more comment, or one more big news story. We'll talk about it very briefly because we're almost out of time. But Hooters was in a year of often weird bankruptcy filings, and many of them were very weird. Hooters was the biggest one, and it is a third of 3 major restaurant chains filing for bankruptcy. And I don't think people appreciate just how big of a deal those 3 bankruptcies were, because we had Red Lobster, which I believe was the biggest restaurant chain bankruptcy in history. TGI Fridays, not small either, and Hooters. By the way, TGI Fridays and Hooters have whole business securitization financing. And to me, that is a major question that goes completely unappreciated pretty much anywhere. And we also, by the way, Fad Brands which is teetering close, as warned about a potential bankruptcy, is also securitized. So we might have three bankrupt securitized companies potentially. We at least have two, and then we have a third that is in real danger of a bankruptcy. And essentially what we have here in at least the restaurant space is at least some evidence that the securitized lending market has gone overboard, much like real estate did before the global financial crisis. Now, obviously not anywhere in the same league as that's kind of significance, but it's still a big deal. You've got these companies that do these sorts of things. But in any event, Hooters might be the company that does better, actually, of all three of those at surviving the bankruptcy, because the company that actually is taking it over involves the original owners, which is very unusual and unique. Usually financial companies come in and take over. They clear out some excess costs and get, and suck these things for cash for a few years and then offload them somewhere else. These are guys that actually care about the chain and had a vision for it, and can also fix a long-term problem, which is you had one group operating in one way, and then most of the stores were operated a different way, and it was weird. And so, it gets everybody on the same playing field, women wearing the same size shorts, so, and things of that nature. But another big bankruptcy filing, Lisa. So that was a underrated story of the year.
Yes, and I'm going to shamelessly plug earlier this year, Jonathan, you did a podcast just for our listeners to know about whole business securitization, which was very interesting. And actually, for anybody who really wants to understand why it's risky, it's a good one to go back and listen to this year.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. That's the nerdiest podcast I've ever done.
I didn't understand a word of it. But there you go.
All right. Coming up later on Tech Check, Joe Guszkowski talks, you guessed it, tech. But first, whatever Ad Spoons brings up to us next.
Keep up with what's happening in the restaurant industry with Restaurant Daily.
I'm NRN Managing Editor Leanne Zinsmeister.
I'm RB Managing Editor Heather Lally.
We bring you a specific look of what's happening in the restaurant world from brands like McDonald's, single unit mom and pop shops, and hot button issues like inflation, tariffs, and more.
Start your day right with the Restaurant Daily podcast every weekday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.
Hello and welcome to Tech Check, where I, Joe Guszkowski, talk really fast about one big topic in restaurant tech. This week, loyalty programs are facing a big test. A lot of restaurants are desperate for traffic right now, and some of them are turning to their loyalty programs to get it. Subway, for instance, is bringing back its Sub Club program, which gives customers a free sub for every 3 that they buy. It's a big bet on loyalty programs' ability to drive traffic with discounts and targeted marketing. But will it work? At Subway, franchisees are already pushing back on Sub Club, saying it's too big of a discount. It highlights an ongoing issue with loyalty programs, which is that there's little agreement on the right way to do them. Meanwhile, many restaurants enjoying strong traffic growth are doing it with broad-based marketing campaigns, like McDonald's Grinch Meal or Chili's 3 for Me combos. Both approaches have their pros and cons, and if an aggressive loyalty program can help a chain like Subway, it would be a big validation of the strategy. But that's a big if.
And that should do it for the week in restaurants. This will be the last episode of the year. We will see you in 2 weeks, in the first week of January. Thank you so much for listening this year and for reading Restaurant Business. The podcast, as always, was edited by Spoons. You can find the podcast on restaurantbusinessonline.com, but please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays for Lisa Jennings. Happy holidays and have a great 2026.